There's something about a wall. Not a metaphor, an actual wall. The one between you and the person on the other side of it. Who has no idea what they've become to you. Who has no idea that you lie there at 3 a.m., listening to them live their life. And something in you has started to change shape around the sound of it. I let out a slow breath here. Because this one I understand in a way I wasn't expecting to when I first heard it. We talk a lot about the big ruptures. The dramatic ones. The moments where you can point at the exact second everything shifted. But sometimes it's not a moment. Sometimes it's a Tuesday. And a Wednesday. And a Thursday after that. It's a sound you didn't ask for. Arriving through a ceiling you didn't choose. In a home that was the one place where the world was supposed to stay out. You know that feeling when you've been patient for so long. That the patience itself starts to feel like a kind of violence. Like you've been holding something so carefully for so long. That your hands have started to shake from the effort of it? Yeah. This is a story about noise. About what it does to a person, slowly, when there's no escape from it. And it's also, and I want you to hear this part, it's also about what a person does when they finally stop trying to escape it. There's a speaker in this story. And what comes out of it makes a kind of sense that's hard to explain. Until you've been where she's been. I think you might already know where this is going. I want to tell you about the best week of sleep I almost had. Not almost had because of anything dramatic. No emergency. No crisis. Just a man named Dale, a Bluetooth speaker the size of a small dog, and the particular kind of person who genuinely seems to believe that the world is a private room he has rented for the weekend. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where the story actually starts. Which is with me, exhausted in a way that sleep alone wasn't fixing. I pulled up to a little rental cottage called the Birch House on a Thursday evening in early October, somewhere in the hill country of central Tennessee. I watched the last of the sun go pink behind a tree line that didn't have a single cell tower in it. I felt, for the first time in maybe 4 months, like I could breathe all the way down. I'm the kind of person who makes lists. I make lists for groceries, lists for work, lists for the lists I haven't made yet. I'd been running on that particular brand of low-grade chaos for so long that I'd stopped noticing it. My sister had been telling me for months to take a week. Just a week. Go somewhere with trees and bad cell service and no one who needed anything from me. So I did. I booked the Birch House on a Tuesday, packed a bag on a Wednesday, and drove 6 hours on a Thursday with the radio off. I was just listening to the road. The rental was exactly what the listing promised. The outside was cedar-sided and dark, tucked back from a gravel road behind 2 actual birch trees. Inside, there was a wood-burning fireplace that worked. A kitchen with a cast-iron skillet hanging on the wall like a piece of art. There was a screened porch on the back that faced nothing but a meadow and the hills beyond it. There was a laminated card on the kitchen counter with the Wi-Fi password, the trash pickup schedule, and a little note at the bottom that read, "We hope you find the quiet you're looking for." I actually laughed a little when I read that. Not because it was funny. Because it was exactly right. My daily rhythm settled in fast. I'd wake up without an alarm, something I hadn't done in years. I'd make coffee in the little stovetop percolator they kept in the cabinet above the stove. I'd take it out to the screen porch and sit in the green Adirondack chair that faced the meadow. And I'd just sit. Not scroll. Not plan. Not make a single list. I'd watch the mist lift off the grass in the morning. I'd feel myself, slowly, becoming a person again instead of a function. By Friday, I'd read 40 pages of a novel I'd been carrying around for 8 months. By Saturday morning, I'd slept 9 hours and woken up slow and calm. The way you're supposed to wake up, the way I'd forgotten was possible. That was Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, the rental next door had new guests. I heard him before I saw him. I was on the porch with my book when the sound arrived. Not loud exactly, not yet, but present in the way a headache is present before it's fully committed. A low, thumping bass line, moving through the wall of trees between the 2 properties like it owned the easement. I looked up from my page. I waited. Sometimes sounds pass. Sometimes a car drives by with its windows down and then it's gone and the meadow comes back. This one didn't pass. I set my book down, walked around to the front of the cottage, and that's when I got my first look at Dale. He was maybe 45, sunburned in the specific way of someone who refuses hats on principle. He was unloading a pickup truck with the energy of a man who had decided this weekend was going to be a production. There was a cooler the size of a small chest freezer. There was a folding table. There were, and I counted, 4 camp chairs. And sitting on the tailgate of his truck, already playing, connected to nothing and no one's permission, was a Bluetooth speaker roughly the size and apparent wattage of a small concert monitor. I told myself, it's the first afternoon. People settle in. Give it time. I gave it time. Saturday night at 11:15, I was lying in bed with the window cracked. Because the night air in October in Tennessee is the kind of thing you write home about. Cool and clean and smelling faintly of wood smoke. And the bass from Dale's speaker was moving through the wall of my bedroom like a second heartbeat. Slow. Rhythmic. Relentless. I lay there for 20 minutes just staring at the ceiling, feeling the mattress faintly vibrate. Watching the piece I had spent 4 months and 6 hours of driving to find evaporate into the dark above me. I put in earplugs. I could still feel it. Sunday morning I introduced myself. I walked over, smiled, and said, "Hey, I'm Nora. I'm staying next door. I just wanted to mention, the music last night was carrying a little further than you might realize." Dale looked at me with the expression of someone who has been told something completely irrelevant to his life. He said, "Oh yeah, we weren't even out that late." I said, "It was after 11. He said, "Yeah, like I said, not even that late," and then turned back to whatever he was doing. I stood there for a second. Just a second. Then I smiled again. The smile you make when you've decided to still be a reasonable person, even though the decision is getting harder. I walked back to my cottage and sat down on the porch. I looked at the meadow and tried to find the feeling I'd had that morning and couldn't quite reach it anymore. Sunday night, the speaker again. 12:30 this time. I know because I looked at my phone, which I had been trying very hard not to do all week. Monday brought a new development. Dale, it turned out, also enjoyed letting his dog. A large, enthusiastic lab mix named, I would later learn, Shooter run the property line unsupervised. I discovered this when I came back from a walk to find Shooter had located the small herb garden. The rental hosts kept along the back fence and had conducted what I can only describe as an archaeological excavation of it. Rosemary, gone. 2 small basil plants, destroyed. There was a ceramic pot tipped on its side with the patient finality of something that had been thoroughly investigated and found unworthy. I knocked on Dale's door. He said, "Oh, he's just curious, he doesn't mean anything by it." I said, "I understand that, but the hosts have a garden back there and he's a dog," Dale said. "That's what dogs do." You know that feeling when you've been patient for so long that patience starts to feel like a lie you're telling yourself? Like you've been performing reasonableness so consistently that you've actually forgotten what you actually feel underneath it? I felt that on Monday afternoon standing on Dale's porch. I nodded slowly while he explained the fundamental nature of dogs to me. I went back inside. I made a list. Not because I needed to, because it's what I do when I need to think. The list had 1 item on it. Here's what I want you to understand about what I did next. It was not mean. It was not harmful. It was not illegal, or even particularly aggressive. It was, in the technical sense of the word, a prank. But it was a prank executed with the calm precision of someone who has been pushed past the point of hoping things will work themselves out, and has arrived somewhere quieter and more deliberate on the other side. I had noticed both nights that Dale's speaker sat on the railing of his porch, unattended, connected to his phone by Bluetooth, faithfully pumping bass into the Tennessee night. I had also noticed that Bluetooth speakers, when they lose their paired connection, go silent. And I had also noticed, this is the part where I am maybe a little embarrassed about how much attention I was paying, that Dale's phone was an older model. The kind that, if you've spent any time around them, you know has a Bluetooth range that's generous but not unlimited. Monday night, I walked out my back door. I went to the far edge of my property. The corner, which happened to be, I had paced this, just slightly beyond the reliable range of his speaker's connection. I stood there in the dark in the October air, in the meadow I'd been looking at all week, and I waited. At 11, not gradually, just stopped. Mid-song. The way silence arrives when something finally lets go. I stood there a moment longer. The night, crickets, wind in the birch trees. Somewhere, I'm not proud of it. But I'm also not proud of it. I went back. I got into bed. I listened to the silence for a while, the way you listen to something you've missed. Then the kind of sleep that feels like falling into something that was always there, waiting for you to stop making noise long enough to find it. He tried to reconnect the speaker twice. I know because I heard it start up again, briefly, both times. And both times I was already at the edge of the property before the second verse. And both times the night went quiet again. By the third attempt, he seemed to give up. Maybe he thought the speaker was glitching. Maybe he thought the battery was dying. I don't know what Dale thought. I know what I heard, which was nothing, which was everything. Tuesday and Wednesday, I repeated the process. It took less time each night. By Wednesday, I was back in bed by 11:20. I left the Birch house on Thursday morning. I packed my bag slowly, the way you pack when you're not in a hurry. When you're trying to keep the feeling going just a little longer. I washed my mug and put it back in the cabinet. I folded the throw blanket on the couch. I stood on the screened porch one last time and looked at the meadow. I felt the cool air on my face and thought, okay, there it is. That's the thing I came for. I don't know if what I did was right. I've thought about it since. Not with guilt exactly, but with the quiet awareness that I became a slightly different version of myself for those 3 nights. A version that was done waiting for things to be fair. That had decided her sleep and her stillness were worth protecting even if the method was a little ridiculous, a little petty, a little more clever than it had any business being. That version of me went and stood in a dark meadow in her shoes and reclaimed the quiet one song at a time. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you've probably had a moment like that too. Where something small finally wasn't small anymore. Where you stopped asking nicely and just handled it. In whatever small, strange, slightly absurd way you could. The last thing I saw when I pulled down the gravel drive was Dale. Sitting on his porch with his coffee. Shooter asleep at his feet. The big speaker sitting silent on the railing in the morning light. He looked perfectly content. Like nothing had happened. Maybe nothing did. Or maybe I'm the only one who knows that for 3 nights in a row, the quiet in that meadow was mine. And I went out and got it, and stood in the dark and held it, and then carried it home with me. I still have it a little, right here. I hope you have somewhere like that too. Some sounds you can hold at arm's length. You let them wash over you, and when they stop, you realize you are almost enjoying them. It's the way you enjoy a storm through a window. You know how a sound can stop being just a sound. How it can get underneath things. That's where this next one lives. Not in a moment, in the accumulation. The same hours, the same ceiling, the same small body moving across it. Ordinary in every way except what it did, slowly, to the person beneath it. I have to sit with that for a second before we go in. The wall between us. There's a specific kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. I know that now. I knew it then too, somewhere underneath everything. But I didn't have words for it yet. I just had this feeling every morning when my alarm went off at 5:47, like the day was already behind me before it started. Like I'd been fighting something in the night and lost, and now I had to get up and pretend I hadn't. I was working as a medical transcriptionist at the time, which sounds dry when I say it out loud, and it was, in some ways. But what it actually meant for my life was this. I worked from home. I wore headphones for 8 hours a day, and by the time I took them off in the late afternoon, my ears were raw, and my concentration was shot, and the only thing I wanted, the only thing I needed, was quiet. Real quiet. The kind that fills a room like water. The kind you can actually rest inside. My apartment gave me that. Or it had. 3rd floor of a building called the Carver Arms, which sounds grand, but was really just a 6-story brick rectangle on the west side of the city, the kind of place where the elevator smelled like someone's dinner, and the hallway carpets were this deep wine color that hid everything and told you nothing. I'd lived there 2.5 years. I knew the sounds of the building the way you know a person's breathing. The pipes that knocked when 4B ran his shower. The particular groan of the stairwell door on the second floor. The way wind moved through the courtyard in November like it was looking for something it had left behind. I was happy there. That's the part I keep coming back to. I was genuinely, quietly happy. And then, in the first week of March, someone moved into 3C. Her name was Petra. I didn't know that at first. For the first few days she was just sound, the drag of furniture across hardwood, boxes dropped from a height that seemed unnecessary, a FaceTime call at 9 in the morning with someone who apparently needed everything repeated back to them twice. Normal moving in noise. I told myself that. I made tea. I put my headphones back on and let it go. But Petra wasn't moving in noise. Petra was a condition. 3C shared a wall with my bedroom. Not my living room, not my kitchen. The wall behind my headboard, specifically, which I would not have thought mattered so much until it did. The first thing I noticed was the music. Not loud music exactly. Not the kind that rattles your windows. It was more like music that didn't know it was traveling. Mid-tempo pop mostly. The kind with a lot of bass that carries through drywall like a heartbeat. She'd play it in the evenings, starting around 8 p.m., and running until somewhere past midnight. It wasn't constant. It would stop, start, change songs midway through. Like she was sorting through something. Like the music was helping her think. I tried to remember that. I tried to hold on to the fact that she was a person, probably, with some kind of interior life, and that the music was probably doing something for her that I just couldn't see from my side of the wall. I bought earplugs, the Max brand, the orange foam ones that come in a little orange tub. I kept them on my nightstand. I told myself this was a reasonable adaptation. I told myself lots of things. By April, it was more than the music. Petra, it turned out, was a pacer. She walked when she was on the phone, back and forth, the same path across her bedroom floor, which was directly above the path across my bedroom floor, and her footsteps had a particular weight to them, a deliberate heel-first quality that came through the ceiling like punctuation. She got a lot of phone calls, long ones. She laughed loudly and often, which, I want to be clear, I did not hold against her. It was a real laugh, unguarded, the kind of laugh people have when they don't know anyone is listening. I'm not a monster. I didn't want her to stop laughing. I just wanted her to laugh at, I don't know, a reasonable hour. I started keeping a mental log, not because I was planning anything, just because I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. March 22nd, music until 1 a.m. March 28th, phone call that started at 11:15, and I fell asleep before it ended. April 4th, something dropped. I genuinely do not know what. That sounded like a small piece of furniture being flung against the shared wall, and I sat up in bed with my heart going fast and stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes before I could settle back down. I stopped sleeping well, and when you stop sleeping well, everything gets thinner. Your patience, your sense of humor, your ability to sit with small frustrations without them feeling enormous. I was making transcription errors I'd never made before. I was snapping at my sister on the phone. I was standing in the grocery store one afternoon in front of the coffee aisle and just standing there. Not choosing. Just standing. You know that feeling when you've been patient for so long that you stop recognizing yourself in it? When you've adjusted and adapted and given the benefit of the doubt so many times that you can't remember what you were like before you started doing all that adjusting? That's where I was, somewhere in April. Hollowed out and running on politeness I didn't have left. I knocked on her door on a Thursday evening. I had rehearsed what I was going to say. I had it all arranged in my head. Calm, neighborly, completely reasonable. That was the whole speech. 40 words, maybe. Completely manageable. She answered the door in a paint-stained sweatshirt with her hair in a clip and a phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder, and she held up one finger at me, the universal gesture for, and then continued her conversation for what I can only describe as a full 2 minutes while I stood in the doorway of her apartment like a piece of mail that hadn't been sorted yet. When she finally hung up, she looked at me with this expression that was almost friendly. Almost. Sorry, and what's up? And I said my 40 words, calmly, reasonably. She tilted her head like I'd said something mildly confusing. I mean, she said, I didn't think I was being that loud. And there it was. That phrase. Like loudness was the only measurement that mattered, and she'd already decided she was on the right side of it. I heard myself say, I'm not asking you to be silent, I'm just, after 11 if you could. I'll try, she said, in the tone of someone who has already decided they won't. I said, thank you, because I had been raised to say thank you even when I didn't mean it. And I walked back to my apartment and sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the wall for a while. She was louder the next night. I don't know if it was intentional. I've thought about that a lot, and I genuinely can't decide. But the music was louder, or it felt louder, and the pacing was longer. And at 11:43 p.m., I know the exact time because I was staring at my phone, willing myself to sleep. She put on a song I recognized, some mid-2000s pop song I'd loved in high school. And I lay there in the dark, listening to a song I used to love through a wall I had started to hate, and something in me just went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The retaliation was not my finest moment. I want to be upfront about that. I have a Bluetooth speaker. Small one, cylindrical, sits on my bookshelf. I bought it to listen to audiobooks while I cook. It has, according to the packaging, 360-degree room-filling sound. I had never really tested that claim. On a Saturday morning, 7:04 a.m., I'm being precise because I think precision matters here, I moved the speaker to my nightstand, positioned it directly against the shared wall, and I played, at a volume I will describe as 45 minutes of a documentary about the migratory patterns of Arctic terns. The narrator had one of those voices, you know the kind, resonant, authoritative, the kind that carries. I sat in my kitchen and ate cereal and listened to the muffled, wall-filtered sound of a man explaining, with great conviction, the navigational instincts of seabirds. And I actually laughed when I realized what I'd done. Just this short, tired little laugh like, of course. Of course it came to this. Of course I am sitting here at 7 in the morning eating cereal and weaponizing nature documentaries. Of course, this is who I've become. She knocked on my door at 7:52. I opened it. She was in pajamas, her hair down, and she looked not angry, exactly. More like someone who had just realized they were in a different kind of conversation than they'd thought. Was that you? She said. Was what me? I said, which was not my best moment, but I said it. She looked at me for a second. Something shifted in her face. Not softening exactly, but recalibrating. The documentary thing? Through the wall? I wake up early, I said, for work. There was a pause. The hallway between us smelled like old carpet and someone's coffee. I could hear the elevator moving somewhere below us. She said, okay, I hear you. And I said, I know you didn't think you were being that loud. I don't know why I said it back to her. I hadn't planned to. It just came out. Not mean, I don't think. Just honest. Just the truth of what I'd been holding. She didn't say anything for a moment, then, I'll get a white noise machine for, the music. That would help, I said. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. And that was it. That was the whole conversation. She got the white noise machine. I know because I could hear it faintly through the wall after that. This low, constant hush, like rain that never quite arrives. The music was still there some nights, but muffled now, softened, the bass swallowed up by all that manufactured static. I started sleeping again, slowly, unevenly, the way you come back to something after you've been away from it for a long time. The first full night I slept through, I woke up at 5:47 and lay there for a few minutes just noticing how different I felt, how much lighter. It sounds small. It was not small. I don't know much about Petra. We've passed each other in the hallway a handful of times since that morning. We nod. Once she held the elevator for me. I said thank you and meant it. I've thought about whether I should have knocked sooner, whether the nature documentary was necessary, whether there was a version of this where I handled it with more grace and less passive-aggressive ornithology. Probably. Almost certainly. But I also think about that night in April, lying in the dark, listening to a song I used to love coming through a wall. And I think about how long I waited before I said anything. How many nights I lay there adjusting, adapting, telling myself it was fine when it wasn't, swallowing it, turning it inward. I don't know what that cost me exactly. I'm not sure I've finished adding it up. The Carver Arms is quiet now, or quiet enough. The pipes still knock in 4B's morning shower. The stairwell door still groans. The wind still moves through the courtyard like it's looking for something. And some nights, through the wall, I can just barely hear that white noise machine running, this soft, steady hush on the other side of the plaster, and I fall asleep to it without meaning to. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. Here is the channel outro for this episode of There's something almost funny about it. Almost. Chuckle, the kind that comes out a little tired, a little sharp at the edges, because you start out being the reasonable one. You tell yourself you're the reasonable one. And then one day, you're standing in your own living room with your hand on a speaker and you think, yeah, okay, here we are. Sigh. I keep coming back to that moment. The decision to just stop absorbing it. To stop being the person who puts the pillow over their head and waits for it to end. There's something in that. Something that isn't pretty. Isn't the version of yourself you'd necessarily want to explain to someone. But it's what happens when something small keeps happening until it isn't small anymore. And nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that noise can do that. That it can get you. That after long enough you stop hearing it as sound and start feeling it as pressure. Behind the eyes. In the chest. That specific kind of tired where you wake up already worn out before the day has even had the chance to do anything to you. Well, maybe you've been there. Not this exactly. Maybe yours wasn't a toddler, wasn't a speaker, wasn't this. But that feeling of your own space not feeling like yours anymore. Of something you can't control slowly making you someone you don't quite recognize. Of reaching for the only thing that feels like, even if it's a little absurd. Even if part of you knows it probably won't fix anything. You do it anyway. Because sometimes you just need to... I don't have a verdict on any of this. I really don't. I just know that the line between coping and unraveling is thinner than people want to admit, and most of us are walking it on less sleep than we should be, in apartments that don't have enough walls, around people who have no idea what their ordinary life sounds like from the other side of the ceiling. That's not an excuse. It's not a condemnation either. It's just what it is. If you've got something you've been carrying, something you haven't said out loud yet, something that sounds small when you try to explain it, but we're here. Anonymously. No names. Just someone to hear it. Come back when you need to feel a little less like you're the only one.